Hi gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. Well, I mean, we're sat in this room and you can feel the love for these cars. How long have you had that passion for the Jags?
Well, for myself, probably 6 or 7 years old is when they took hold, and I just fell in love with them. There used to be a Cadbury's milk tray advert with an E-Type being used to jump a bridge to deliver the chocolates to a lady, and it's all those sort of things that capture the imagination as a youngster. And then we used to go down to my nan's for Sunday lunch, and it was down Hythe in Kent, and driving to the beach down at Littlestone. There was an E-Type coupe parked en route, so by the time I'd seen that, I didn't need to go to the beach. That's all I wanted to see. So I just fell in love with E-Types from an early age.
And yourself, Paul?
Yeah, no, I don't know if it was quite so deep-rooted, but when I was a little kid, by pure chance really, my pedal car was an E-Type, a little metal E-Type, and I still remember it, metallic blue. And yeah, that's how I started. But just as car guys, I mean, you can't really, car guys, certainly of my age, you can't fail to not have an affinity of some degree with the Jaguar E-Type, because it is such an icon.
What do you think it is? Because I think even if you're not a car guy, a non-car guy or lady will look at these cars and something will happen with them. What do you think that is?
Just look at the shape. Yeah, the shape, and at the time, I mean, it did 150 mile an hour, which was, you know, you think back to the 60s, the early 60s, and you know, what else was out there on the road. 150 mile an hour is quite something today. So back then, it was like a spaceship.
Is there something in the shape when they were designing it that they were trying to get across?
Yeah, it was. I think it was aerodynamic led, wasn't it? It was Malcolm Say was an aerodynamicist. He's the guy that drew it. So I don't even know whether he actually styled it particularly for it to be stylish, or whether he was actually, you know, whether it was the aerodynamics that led the shape that ultimately became the E-Type. But whatever it was, for whatever reason, technical or aesthetics, it certainly worked.
The other thing is, obviously, with the Le Mans, you know, Jaguar really shot to fame in the 50s winning Le Mans, originally with the C-Type, but then brought out the D-Type, which was so revolutionary. Monocoque, a bit like a Spitfire, you know, and people often make the comparison, and won Le Mans 3 times in succession. So the fact that it's a road-going Le Mans winning or triple Le Mans winning car for the road is basically what the E-Type is in essence. If you look at the two, very, very closely linked.
So let's look at Eagle. What was the need for Eagle? Why did you set up Eagle in the first place?
Well, driven by myself loving E-Types all my life, if you like, really. So my dad had taken early retirement from what was National Benzel, became Shell and stuff, and we ended up a bit later on, he was looking after some petrol stations and things, and I just have a passion of cars and working on cars from probably 9 or 10 years old. And then I joined the local motor club when I was about 12, and a guy took me under his wing, and my mum had an old Austin A40 that had broken its diff, and he said, well, I've got a diff and I'll give it to you, but you've got to fit it yourself. So I then learnt mechanical work quite early on, but always, so I took sort of, instead of going through A-levels, I went on a 3-year course that took you into management of the motor trade in the industry. Everyone, like Paul says, we're just absolutely dyed-in-the-wool passionate car guys, although my report said a little less time on the motorbikes would be preferable. So again, we love that sort of stuff, and I just loved E-Types, but also restoration. My work experience, you had to go out into industry, and I initially did a spell at Brands Hatch at the racing school, which was great fun, but you didn't learn much. But then went to Rolls-Royce and Bentley restorer specialists that were super high quality. And that really, race cars that have to be reliable, plus top level quality and restoration, which was never really around, is really what Eagle became, doing that type of approach for E-Type Jaguars.
It sounds more like fun than work that you were trying to look for, I think, with Eagle, from your own like passion that you were building. Would that be the case?
Yeah, it's just, you know, at college, you know, the guys, some people are into the American muscle cars, and all the guys that love, you know, the Ford range and RS 1600s and things, but it was always the E-Type for me. So I just I mean, people say, oh, you were quite clever to pick the E-Type Jaguar, but the E-Type picked me. You know, it was never a conscious decision. It's just, as Paul says, they're such an iconic car and so ahead of their time, and they were a generation ahead of everything else. So you've got a monocoque body, you know, independent suspension at the back. So you've got, you know, XJ6 Magic Carpet Ride suspension that's so revered is in the E-Type back in 1961, and the XJ6 came out in 1968. So you've got a great car that's easy to drive with amazing performance. But of course, William Lyons was determined to offer them a third of the price he could sell them for. So they always had massive waiting lists, but he was just obsessed on building them down to a price. And in a funny way, we're the total opposite. We're building them up to a quality that at the time, even the Rolls Royces at the time were probably not built to the quality that we're looking at with the cars today. But everyone's expectations have changed. You know, look at modern production cars and how they're made. It's just a completely different setup to cars that rusted out within 5 years old in the 60s, as Paul mentioned earlier on.
So what do you think was the need? Was there a need for something like Eagle?
I think when I joined Henry, which was right at the end of the 80s, restoration, there was a big classic car scene and people were interested in classic cars, but restoration was kind of a different level. You know, restoration was normally done, there's kind of an expression that's been used like Fred's in sheds, you know, just kind of ramshackle sheds and garages, and the cars would get, you know, repaired, if you like, and a respray, and more involved restoration was quite rare, and so we actually started to restore them to a different level right in those early days. No compromise, no stone left unturned. If we're going to do it, we're going to do the whole thing and do it properly. And that was sparked off, one, by our own desire to do that, but secondly by a customer who has subsequently became our kind of chairman, and who became very interested in the company and supported us all the way. And he was quite rare. He'd had an E-Type restored. He wasn't really satisfied with how the E-Type had been restored, and so he came to us and basically asked us to do it properly, didn't he?
That's right.
Yeah.
So when you say do it properly, there's there's a thing about, you know, I've been around and had a look around the place now, and you call it restoration in its simplest term, but is it part engineering, part art, part person? It seems a lot more than just...
It totally is. The art thing it came a lot later, but if you're referring to some of the aesthetic changes that we kind of dared to make more recently, perhaps 15 years ago or so, before that, there was still some people that particularly wanted, you know, the purists that wanted to keep things as original as possible, and we were the same. We would maintain certain details on the car, or you know, we would keep them authentic, and that gradually kind of fizzled out, and people became less interested in authenticity and completely focused on having a car that worked properly. You know, they wanted reliability, and durability, and they wanted it to, you know. But by the 90s, when did the Golf Mark 1 come out, a Golf GTI? What year was that?
GTIs would have been about 76 with the Golf, and GTIs
wow,
around about the 1800 Golf. And this was my first modern car, a Mark 1 1800 GTI, which was 83, 84.
So even by then, you know, you've got, I mean, a Mark 1 Golf GTI was a really, really capable car. And so a 60s sports car was actually struggling to stop as well, to go as well, to corner as well. So people were fancying, in let's say the 90s, were fancying a classic car and the experience of owning a classic car, but they didn't want the aggravation that went with it, which was the inherent unreliability and the fact that you've got antiquated brakes and suspension and all the rest of it. Well, the E-Type, as it happens, was incredibly well designed, and it responded really, really well to the upgrades that we developed, so we could start to make the car stop and go and fulfil the expectations. You know, people would look back at, you know, they would fancy owning a classic car and be looking at the experience through kind of rose tinted glasses, and it could be quite disappointing, you know, the actual reality of it all. So we were addressing that, and we just progressed from there.
So, with all these changes, so when you set out, there's a vision that you had, and as you say, you know, tastes and the things that people want have changed. But is the vision still underlying? Is it still there?
It was quite an organic process, really. We never there was no game plan to create Eagle as a brand or to do these particularly highly modified E-Types or doing aesthetic changes. It literally took a really nice little natural path, didn't it, I think?
Yeah, we both competed in a thing called the Pirelli Classic Marathon in 1988, and that was the first ever long distance historic rally, which obviously now historic rallying's a massive pastime for people, but that was a 2,500 mile trip down to the Alps using all the alpine test routes and passes and legendary race circuits like Monza and Nürburgring and things as well, and Spa. And Paul and I were in the top 6 the whole way through to the end, and I went back in '89 in the same E-Type that I bought to do the event in 1987. I bought that car, so I've had it nearly 40 years now. I still have it, and I was lucky enough to win it that year. And we had Sterling Moss and Paddy Hopkirk and all the superstars also competing, and we lucky enough to get the fastest time up the Stelvio Pass. But when I got to the top, you know, the rear brakes were literally on fire. The water was pouring out the overflow like it was a boiling kettle, and you know, I had to quickly get down to try and cool it all down. And then I had the use of a 911 SC for a holiday where we went touring down in the Black Forest in Germany, which the brakes didn't overheat, it didn't get hot. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to have an E-Type with the confidence that this 911 produces? And that's literally when Paul joined us as well full time, having campaigned in the 911 in the '88 marathon. And that was the beginning of what we did. And then, as he says, John McLaren came along and was fed up with what he said, more banknotes for the shredder with his restored E-Type.
This is the guy that John McLaren is the guy that asked us to restore a car without compromise.
And what it was, you know, basically, as Paul says, at that time, a restoration was if it was half worn, you put it back on. And he said, if it's anywhere, I'd like it so it's like new. And that's really the big difference that we did, isn't it? And then he used to drive down to a friend's place in Switzerland. So again, he wanted reliability and things that work. And it sort of seems to be that we're the grandfather of what's now called a Restomod, because we were doing that in 1991 is when John came to see us. So it goes right back that far.
So you finished first in that race. Where did you finish in that race?
I wasn't in the one that Henry won. But
we went back for the third year actually. We paired up together, and we managed to get. There was only 4 of us got a gold cup for 3 consecutive clear runs, Alpine Cup. So that was probably harder to do than win the event to actually get the gold cup. But they wouldn't let me take the E-Type back, so we took a thing called a Daimler SP250 Dart, which is a fiberglass bodied little 2.5 litre V8 engine car on a Triumph TR chassis. So very different. We even had to have some sort of things to hold the doors from pinging open up the passes and up the Stelvio. So a different experience, but we succeeded in what we wanted to do, didn't we, with that, which was amazing. So
can you take me, so it's all highly personalised what you do. So when the individuals come here, can you take me through just a little bit of that journey from the moment that person walks in here and they start the conversation with you?
It can be 2 different kind of journeys, because some customers will come here with a preconceived idea of what they want and a vision, and that's I guess it's easier, but it's still interesting, and you can guide them within narrow parameters, if you like. Other people will come here and they know they want a car from us, but they don't really know what they want. So you might not at that stage even know the model. There's various different model variations, and they might not even know that. So it's a much wider kind of path you've got to guide them down. So it's very different.
You say they don't know what they want.
Yeah.
And maybe that's from, you know, the nuts and the bolts and like that. But they come to you because they want something. And what is it that you think they want at that point?
Well, they want an E-Type, and they want an E-Type that is the best of the best, and that's going to be reliable and is going to be a lovely thing. But they might not know what model they want. Sometimes they might not even know if they want a convertible or a coupe, you know. And then there's various other fundamental decisions to be made as well.
Do you think they have an expectation of what they're going to get from it in the end? So what they finally get that vehicle. What is it you think they're going to feel and get out of it at that when it arrives?
I think, to be honest, when they come and drive a car initially, they're blown away with how modern it is and easy to drive it is, and especially jumping out of modern cars. And we run some modern cars to see, the type of car people are driving, and it's certainly, they come to us because they've heard about us. We've been around over 40 years now. 1984, funny enough, the Golf GTI year I just referred to was when we set Eagle up, but they know they'd like something that works. We're very focused that we don't want to. We sort of don't want to dilute the spirit of the original car. So, as Paul says, the car was so advanced when it was new that we don't have to go radical with things that we do. In fact, most of the stuff we do is based on Jaguar's own lightweight competition E-Type in 1963. So our key things on our special edition cars is basically pretty much exactly the same as Jaguar did, and our low drag is from the tooling of Jaguar's own one-off low drag that they built at the time in 62 as a stillborn GT race project. So people love the idea, but it's quite interesting because if people come from modern cars, we used to have an options where we do like a classic, a GT, a sport, etc. But it's pretty clear now that everyone wants all the good things that we do, so listing them over a number of pages is irrelevant. But and people say, I want a car that's fully loaded, but you don't necessarily want nylon suspension bushes and a solidly mounted rear axle cradle that we did on a sort of a GT3 style E-Type for one particular guy, which is exactly what he wanted. But we talk people out of having things if we don't think so. It's very much we sit down and we match their expectations and base it on their intended driving requirements, if you like, really. And it's very much owning these cars is something. It's a piece of art, but it's also a lifestyle thing. So we've recently introduced some tours for Eagle clients, and they absolutely love it. And everyone gets on. You've got such a like-minded passion, and funny enough, some big collectors that have got mega expensive, high-value cars that are then refining their collection, and we're always thinking, well, that's fantastic, because if we could get their car back, we've got someone would love to buy it straight away, and it's the one car they don't want to sell, which is really annoying if you've got someone that would love to buy one and might be a bit frustrated that we've enjoyed a sort of 2 to 3 year lead time since the very first Eagle that we announced we would do another car the same as John's. We got 3 orders at the Sandown Park Collectors Fair back in '94, and our order book's been full ever since, to be honest.
And how important is that personal and that personalised service that you give to clients?
Yeah, that's a massive part of it. And even if the customers don't realise it at the point of ordering, and they just they've heard about our cars and they've got a desire for what we do, pretty soon they start to really appreciate the fact that we are a tiny company building very, very few cars. They will get to know every single person on this site here, every member of the team, and it's that becomes really highly valued. And this bespoke one-of-one exclusivity is it's just gaining in value every year, I think, isn't it? I mean, it's
without a doubt.
Yeah, so they will value that a lot.
And you sort of mentioned a moment ago about how you with the tooling and like the integrity of the original brand, and then how people may want to, is there a line where you can't cross between something they might want personally and something that doesn't fit in with what you would believe to be the integrity of the brand?
Yeah, we've always said that we've set our own lines, and our lines are really simple, that we do everything that's relevant to an E-Type as it was in period. So every Eagle E-Type is an original authentic Jaguar E-Type. So we take one car, completely strip it down, dismantle it, reprocess everything. So we won't fit a modern V8 Jaguar engine, which is the easy way to get power and torque, somebody might say. You can't have electric windows, you can't have an electric soft top, we don't do central locking. So we're very much that the car was great as intended, and if you like all those things, go and buy an F-Type or something which has got that sort of stuff, which won't have the character, because of course it's so heavy. So it's very much that we'll do everything that would be something that would have been done in period, but with modern technology we can just improve confidence levels for people so much, as Paul says, on electrics, cooling, brakes, the areas obviously that were dated. Bear in mind the E-Type prototype was around in 56, 57 with E1A, so you're looking at a car going back nearly 70 years.
It sounds like a bit of a contradiction, because we are modernising and we are exploiting and capitalising on modern technology and processes and components and all the rest of it. I mean, we're putting in, we're using 3D printing and modern brakes and things that are going to benefit the car. But there is a line, and it's difficult. It would be difficult to explain that line, but there is a line which we won't cross. Which, like Henry said, putting a modern V8 Jaguar engine in it is not something that we consider. It needs to be kept within certain parameters, and I think we've that line that's difficult to explain is actually done us well, really, because there are other variations of and work that's been done on E-Types that I think has crossed the line, and I don't think it's done those people very well. Building kind of custom car hot rods is not what we're doing. We're keeping the spirit and the character.
And I think if you're not a car person, I mean, to be honest, I think I've understood about every fourth word that you that's saying. But for me, it's so when if you're not that nuts and bolts or the technical side, and you're just that person. So what do you want? Like you're the person in the relationship maybe with the car. Is what do you want them to feel when they sit inside it?
Yeah, it's a tricky one to answer that, because we have some guys are incredibly technical.
Right.
We had one guy that specified the gear ratios he wanted,
right,
which was a phenomenal request, and they were really the gear ratios that he chose were actually really good ratios. He really knew what he was talking about. And we have other people that just want the charm and the beauty of the car, and dream about the experiences it might bring them. Driving down to the south of France or wherever. And we're happy to converse and deal with any of those people. If they want to get technical, that's fine. That's fun. We enjoy it. They enjoy it. If not, we can guide them through it. And like Henry touched on earlier, to be honest, rather than having a 4 or 5 page options list, everybody wants air conditioning, and they want the best damping, suspension damping. They want maximum grip, the best brakes and everything else. So now that's become the standard, is to have a package of upgrade. Of course, I mean, reliability, absolutely fundamental. The days of, I remember going to school, my mum in a little Mini, and it was perfectly normal for her she'd turn ignition on and nothing would happen. So she'd open the boot, and there was a hammer always in the boot. She'd bang the fuel pump till it started ticking, and then we'd get in and off we go. That was normal back then. But that, by the time we started doing these restorations in the 90s, nobody wanted that. Can you imagine the indignity of going to the pub in your beautiful E-Type and all eyes are on you when you finish your lunch and you're driving off, and you've got to start, gapping the points and things to get the thing to start. That was history. Nobody wanted that.
And I'm laughing because I remember that my mum had a Triumph Herald, and it used to have a problem with the battery terminal, and she knew she'd have to tap the terminal. So in the middle of Tunbridge Wells, in the shopping car park, the only she could find was my brother's toy gun that she got out and banging it away. And I thought, today you'd have a squad arriving for everywhere, wouldn't you, if that happened? But that was the norm, as you say, wasn't it?
It was. Well, now we're living in a world where lots of people don't change their own spare wheel. If they get a puncture, they'll call the AA. A lot of cars haven't even got a spare wheel now. It's a different world.
I do the same when I go home with my kids and I take them around, and you're going up some of the hills like in North Yorkshire, and the amount of time to go, and that's where we ended up pushing the car up that one, and we used to roll down that one because there was a garage at the bottom, and it was like all those places you knew you could at least get somewhere, because you'd stop somewhere. We're in travel. And like you've mentioned a few times about, when they're going down to the south of France and there's a real sort of sense with these cars that they are about a journey, as that they're not your A to B. There's an experience there. Would you say that was the case?
Oh, totally. It absolutely is. And Henry also mentioned earlier, touched on the tours that we've been doing, like an annual driving tour for our customers, which is something we wanted to do forever. And we suspected it would be a good thing. And then we build cars. We haven't got time. We haven't got the expertise and the skills to organise tours as you do. But now we've got somebody to do those tours for us. It's been an absolute revelation lovely little exclusive tours, which will all mean a lot to you. The benefit of bespoke custom tours tailored for those for our customers, and it's just the best thing ever. We've been to California, done a tour through California, Spain. We're going to Italy this year, Norway, etc. And it's the best thing ever. Apart from the fact that they're really enjoyable trips, it's giving even more purpose to them having that car in the garage, and it's working really, really well.
Do you think there's if as owners of the E-Types, is there like a family there? Is there like a
the Eagle family? Yeah, definitely.
wave handers going by down the road? Is
They're
there
too rare. Our cars are too rare that you're not going to see another one coming the other way. But it's definitely a family thing. There's definitely the Eagle family, and
the whole classic car scene is exactly that. Everyone waves to each other, so regardless of what the car is. Oh. So a guy in a vintage Rolls Royce will wave to a guy in a 20-year-old classic or something like an MGF with a younger driver or something. It might be their first classic or something like that. So it's got a real camaraderie, with classic cars anyway. And as Paul says, we found that a lot of our clients, it turns out they've got a lot in common anyway. And certainly most of them they're not technical experts, but that's not a barrier. In fact, John McLaren, with the first car we did, found himself down very regularly visiting, which again we encourage, and was really interested in learning about things, coming from a banking and finance world at the time. So you don't need to be intimidated by thinking, I don't know what I'd like, because it's very much sitting down. I'm sure with your travel things exactly the same. You'll tailor something that people don't have to worry. We take away all the worry for them, which is normally associated if you're going to take the risk of driving around in an old classic car. So we take all of that concern away.
You talked about the tours and you talked about like journeys that people take. From your own experiences, where is like the favourite journey and experience that you've had in the car? The road, a location, a place, a time?
That's a huge question, because we've both done a lot of travelling, a lot of overland drives and things, and there's so many places are different and and they shine for a different reason. I don't know if I could actually answer that. What's the best?
I think my stage up the Stelvio, which was just perfect. It was just every gear change was right, every corner was right, and as I beat the second car by 2 seconds, so it was that close on a 12.5-minute climb. So that I remember that was so exhilarating, and it just felt so relaxing and natural and yet quick. So it just showed how capable an E-Type was, because it was never used in international rallying, but had it been developed, it's a car that could have done so much more. But Jaguar didn't need the publicity at the time, so the Ferrari 250 GTO is the famed most valuable car in the world, worth in excess of $50 to $70 million these days. And if the E-Type had been developed, the lightweight E-Types in '63, as is proved these days at Goodwood, they were more than a match for those cars, had Jaguar had the appetite to get behind it.
But if I walk in here and I see that, what is it that you think in their head that person imagines?
Possibly it's what we're talking about. I mean, they probably do see themselves, pulling up outside a lovely restaurant or a nice hotel, or wind in their hair, going down the
my favourite roads
coast
probably,
road.
isn't it? Yeah. I mean, the car we're talking about behind you, of course, was immortalised by Jeremy Clarkson back in 2011, which is the 50th anniversary of the E-Type, when he did a feature which initially we took all the original E-Types to a village in Kent called Chilham, and they were all driving around and around in the set scene for Top Gear, and we could hear him saying, all these lovely original buildings, imagine if someone wanted to make them all modern and mess them all up. And we thought, this is going to go one of two ways. And he said, well, does Eagle have done this to the E-Type? And I think a lot of that, he was looking at it, talking about it with all of Turner's backdrop, if you like, looking up, from the Sussex coastline, looking inland. And he said, I think this might be the most beautiful car. No, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And that, that's amazing. But you look at it, and as I say, it is a piece of rolling art, if you like, really. And I think one of the things is E-Types and particular, and classic cars, people stop and let you out a junction, which in modern exotic cars they definitely won't. You know, so it's interesting. You have this whole different mindset that people love to see and wave and smile when they see these cars on the road.
And I think there's one of the things I like the phrase you said, rolling art. That, you know, because I think that's, you know, from all of the technical aspects of it, and I do agree when you said, like, you know, the gear feels perfect, every move, every turn is great, but it is art as well. And I think, you know, I think they get absorbed by them, and that, you know, and they want them as well. Is that when people come through, do you get that sense from them as well? As, I mean, what is the want? That's the bit that I'm trying to get.
Sometimes there's nostalgia. It might be something that they remember fondly from being a kid and seeing them on the road, which is where at our age we fit in, because I wasn't born when the E-Type first hit the road, but I remember it fondly as a kid, or their dad might have had one. And then there is, you know, other elements where people, it doesn't actually have any nostalgic attachment to them, but they just look at them and they think they're beautiful, and maybe they do perceive them as art. We do.
I mean, the Speedster's interesting, isn't it? Because it's on the Gran Turismo games and things as well, is it? I think that's the one, and lots of the parents, children, recognise the Speedster first. Oh, it's the Eagle Speedster, you know. So it's
quite handy. It's Forza Horizon, one of the driving games,
right.
one of the big driving games, and they modelled the Speedster, and that's one of the option cars on it. So there are kids that only know about that shape from the Eagle Speedster on their driving game. They don't remember it on the road or anything.
Featured in one of the Fast and Furious films. I think it was number 6, wasn't it? And it was, you know, vintage cars in an auction scene, I think, wasn't it? And the Eagle Speedster was one of the cars. So it's amazing the depth that gets that we don't realise. You know,
I suppose it's got that nostalgia, but it's becoming ingrained in modern culture as well now.
Yeah. And it's actually that very car behind you is actually ingraining it in a much, much younger generation that haven't got any interest in going back to the original 60s E-Types necessarily, but they've seen that in various either Top Gear or films or their computer game.
So in terms with the E-Types and with the Eagles, so you've gone from that nostalgia, this, you know, classic vehicles. It's now, you know, within the modern vernacular and media. Where are you going to take the business, or how much will change and how much will stay the same within the integrity of the vehicles?
When you say that, you mean the build of the vehicle? Or
yeah,
just
maybe the bit, or maybe within innovation, or what are you seeing that people are asking for that may be different to what they were asking for 10 years ago?
I mean, we'll keep, as far as innovation goes, we're always open-minded, and we'll keep our eye on what becomes, what new materials, new processes, new techniques become available, and if any of those suit the car and can help us make the car even better, then we'll adopt those if it's practical. We're kind of customer-led, really. I mean, if customers ask us to do certain things and spark us into taking a new direction, then we'll do that. I mean, we haven't really necessarily got plans to there's nothing else in the pipeline specifically that we're going to do. Well, I suppose there is.
We've got one that we'd like to do, which will be in a few years' time if we do it, which again, it'll be very much, you know, period-led, but just moving it forwards a little bit to what probably could have happened, you know, but it's very much still keeping it around our 60s base cars and things as well, so that's quite exciting. But I think, you know, what we've already seen is we've almost been past peak car. So, you know, I got in a modern car for a quick run up the road the other day, and there's lights flashing, and it snatched the wheel out my hand because I hadn't pressed a button to realise I might just go over this white line for a second to miss a pothole or something. And I think we've already got peak car. So I think analogue driving is going to be so much more popular, you know, because it's just the cars are so sanitised today. It's just a different type of thing, really. So we really stick with our formula works really well. So there's no need to change it for the sake of it, because we've been refining them for decades.
Do you think there's something in? I got that idea of it feels like almost like more of an organic, right? You know, you're driving it rather than it driving you.
What, the car?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, what Henry says about, I mean, touchscreens and driver aids. People are just getting fed up with it. I mean, it's so intrusive, and it kind of dilutes the driving experience. But I think even if you're not interested, if you're getting from A to B and you're not particularly interested in the experience of getting there, I think they're still a bit of a pain. You know, some of these driver aids, and it's refreshing to get in a fundamentally analog car. And actually, you know, the driving experience is something. It is quite valuable, and it adds to the journey.
Yeah, I think it's that you enjoy the experience, you enjoy the car. It's not just it's not that A to B that we all just need to do.
Yeah, it's definitely not just
there's a little
A to
bit
B.
more heart to it as you're driving along. I'm just going to wrap up on customers in here. And then they've got the car, but they go away and they talk to their friends about the experience that they've had with Eagle. What is it you think that they tell them?
I think one of the things that, again, touching on the driving experience we were just talking about, is the biggest surprise for people is just how easy and relaxing the cars are to drive. Because you'd think driving an old car is difficult, and you know, driving a vintage Bentley and mastering the gears, or even a 50s XK Jaguar with its old crunchy moss box still is quite hard work. So I think it's just the fact that it just looks after you. They're open cars, but they don't flex. You know, modern exotic cars from a few years old with the cabriolet version. The first one I drove, I thought was unbelievable the way it flexed, and that you could hold the door and feel the gap between the rear wing closing just on before we had the roads as rough as they seem to be at the moment. So I think it's a big surprise just how friendly and easy they are to live with.
That's the product. That's you know, touch the car. That's going to cost me. But the experience they've had with you, how will they describe that to someone?
I don't know how to describe it, but we have quite a lot of customers that they've waited 3 years, maybe more, for their car to be delivered, and the day finally comes that they're, you know, hopefully see us in the handover room, and we're going to, you know, they're going to take delivery of their car, and they say, you know, I've waited a long time for this, and this is a big day, and this is fantastic, and what a fabulous day, but I'm really going to miss the experience of the interaction with us all here and the team and having it built. And we've had quite a few customers that have said, so I'll have to have another one, I'm going to order another one. So if they've ordered a closed car or a coupe or a roadster, they might, you know, they've got the open car, I'll have a closed car now. So we've got quite a lot of customers that have got two cars to extend that experience.
And they're different cars, aren't they, with different characters?
Yeah.
You know, they are. You definitely use them on different days for different experiences, so you're not having something that's identical whatsoever. And that's the beauty of, I think the thing as well is the tailoring that we offer is ultra-bespoke. You know, so lots of people talk about tailor-mades, for example, and it's not got anything like the depth of things we can do for people.
I just think it feels like, you know, people, you know, they set out on this journey, which is they want, this is what I want and this is what I'm going to get, but actually they're coming back because of that bit in the middle, which
I think
the
so.
bit they're going to miss the joy of getting there.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what's important to your brand as well.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Yeah.
Okay. We're going to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen.
No,
Thank
you're welcome.
you.
Thanks very much.